What's up, ladies and gents? This is KSigKid, coming at you with another Destiny video. Today I want to talk about artifacts again. We talked about how the artifacts are changing in the Rise of Iron, and there's been a lot of talk about whether some of these artifacts are going to be awesome, whether some of these artifacts are going to be OP, and whether some of these artifacts are going to be called for nerfs and bans almost instantly. And the one that's around the center of it all is typically the Memory of Felwinter. So what I want to do is I want to talk about this a little bit, share some of the things that we absolutely know to be true about this artifact already, and then I just want to give my opinion on whether I think this artifact will be useful, whether it will be OP, or whether it will just waste some space in your inventory. So let's get started by just doing a recap of what this artifact actually is. In case you forgot, the Memory of Felwinter, what you do is you give up your super, and instead of your super you're able to have 2 melees and 2 grenades on your character. So that sounds pretty nice, that's pretty interesting. You'll get 2 grenades and 2 melees regardless of what gear you end up having on. Now, at first I was a little bit curious as to whether or not you might potentially be able to get 3 melees and 3 grenades depending on your gear, if it truly does give you an additional, or if it actually caps out at 2. But Game Informer on their GI show, they actually ended up clarifying that in their podcast, so I just want to go ahead and play that right now for you so you can see for sure that it is maxed out at 2.
I agree. Like they're not things that are going to like dramatically change everybody's playstyle, but some of them are pretty significant.
What
right?
are some of the biggest ones? I feel like not being specific.
I think the biggest one is there's one that lets you lose your super, but you get a boost to all your stats, and you get 2 of both your grenade and your melee, and that's a completely different play style, right?
Yeah.
There will be people who specialize in that and get really good at it, and take advantage of the fact that they've got all their stats boosted up, that they can throw extra grenade all the time. If they previously have used a build where they might have an exotic with that gives you 2 grenades, they can use that slot in a different way. You're not going to get 3 grenades, but you can, instead of wearing as a Titan the Armamentarium, you could put on a different exotic. I mean, it's those sorts of ways that you're going to get to play with your build.
And it's actually a good thing that they're saying that it's already capped out at 2, because it lets us already predict and kind of get a sense as to how powerful 2 grenades and or 2 melee abilities actually are. And we'll get into that with all of our characters. The one thing that we do not know though is how much those stats are boosted and what stats are actually boosted. Is it just our health, our regen, and our agility? Or are things like reload speed, weapon handling, and stuff like that affected? Because that can really make or break things. Because who remembers doing the Valentine's Day doubles event? Whenever you had that boost, whenever your teammate ended up dying, you were absolutely ridiculous. Now, in no way do I possibly think that we're going to get that big of a stat boost, or it's going to boost all of those stats. But if it is a decently significant stat boost, then that might change the opinion of things. But unfortunately, right now at this moment, we do not know that, so we can't really make any predictions based off of the stat boosting. We'll have to wait and see on that. Now, what I actually want to do is I want to go over all 3 of our characters and all the subclasses and talk about which subclasses are able to have 2 grenades, which subclasses are able to have 2 melees, and which subclasses are able to have 2 grenades and 2 melees at the exact same time. This is pretty important, as we can kind of gauge whether or not each subclass is going to benefit from having both of those abilities going off at once. So for the Titan, I thought that the Titan was going to be really easy. I thought that the Titan was going to be a slam dunk, and even though I was wrong, it kind of was at the same time. So obviously with the Titan, you can have 2 grenades, and it doesn't matter what class you're on, every class for the Titan can have 2 grenades, and that's because of the Armamentarium. So we already know that the Armamentarium is extremely popular on the Titan. 2 lightning grenades is a really good thing, so we know that 2 grenades, at least on the Striker Titan, is really powerful. You don't see it a ton on the other classes, but it's definitely a very useful chess piece that the Titan can wear. So every Titan can have 2 grenades, and I didn't think that any Titans could get 2 melees, but I was wrong. In fact, every Titan can also get 2 melees because they have the insurmountable Skull Fort. With this, every single Titan can also have 2 melees. And this was actually a change to the insurmountable Skull Fort in year 2. Every single Titan can have 2 melee charges, and it doesn't matter that the helmet is a little bit more catered towards the Striker Titan, As you can see on my defender, my second melee charge is still charging up. So every single Titan has the option of having either 2 melee or 2 grenades. But how often do you ever see Titans rocking out 2 melees? Pretty much never, and that's even if they don't have the armamentarium. They'll pick something else. You really do not see Titans wearing 2 melee charges pretty much ever, and that's because the Titan melee is just, well, quite frankly, it's probably the worst melee that's in the game. The Striker Titan melee has some possibilities with overload, but overall you're much better suited to have 2 grenades on your Striker Titan. So will 2 grenades and 2 melees make that big of a difference to give up your super? We'll have to wait and see. Now as far as the Hunter goes, the Hunter is where things get a little bit more interesting. With the Hunter, things get a little bit more interesting. Every single Hunter can have 2 melee charges. Every single Hunter can have 2 melee charges with the grasps, so that's a really nice thing. Here I am on my Blade Dancer. You can see I was just swinging and I have that second melee charge going. So every Hunter has the option to have 2 melee charges. But there's only one Hunter that has the ability to get 2 grenades, and that's actually the Gunslinger. And the Gunslinger has to put on the young Amkar's spine to get it, and your grenade has to be a trip mine grenade, because that was a change in year 2. But the other cool thing is that the Gunslinger can also have 2 melees. So the Gunslinger has the ability to have 2 melees and 2 grenades at the same time. So here you are on your Gunslinger, and the Gunslinger already basically has a built-in Memory of Felwinters. You already have 2 melee, you already have 2 grenades. Why would you ever want to put on this artifact and give up your super when you can already do all of that and still have the golden gun? Those stat boosts better be massive if you want to even remotely consider putting this on your Gunslinger. Because I mean, trip mine grenades are still the best grenades that the Gunslinger has, and one of the best in the game in my opinion. Finally, moving on to our Warlock, it gets a little bit confusing with the Warlock as well. Every single Warlock class can have 2 melee abilities thanks to the Claws of Amkar. So every Warlock can always have 2 melee abilities if you decide to do so, and that's pretty much where the Stormcaller stops at. The Stormcaller can only have 2 melees, but it gets a little bit more interesting with the Voidwalker and the Sunsinger. So the Voidwalker could pick between having 2 melees or 2 grenades if you pick scatter grenades. If you've got the Nothing Manacles on, you could have 2 scatter grenades, but of course you'd give up the ability to have 2 melee charges. And you also have to pick scatter grenades. It's not like you can pick Axiom Bolts and have 2 of those. So if you really like scatter grenades, you can always have 2 scatter grenades on your Voidwalker. But the Sunsinger, it gets just a little bit crazier. Okay, for starters, you could get your 2 melee with your Sunsinger, and you can also have your 2 grenades by picking the Gift of the Sun perk, and that will let you pick absolutely any grenade. So right here, you're basically built just like the Gunslinger in that you can always have 2 grenades and 2 melee abilities if you put on the Claws and pick that perk. But also, you could end up picking 2 grenades for the Sunsinger if you end up grabbing yourself the Sunbreakers, which will end up giving you 2 solar grenades only. So the Sunbreakers give you 2 solar grenades, and boom, there you go. You've got 2 solar grenades, and you can pick some of the burns with that. But it's not over just yet. The Sunsingers have yet another ability to give you 2 grenades, and that's if you pick the Starfire Protocol. If you pick this, you will get 2 fusion grenades instead. So yeah, the Sunsinger is a little bit confusing, but it does have the ability to give you 2 melees and 2 grenades at the exact same time. So much like the Gunslinger, why would you want to put on the Memory of Felwinter on your Sunsinger and give up your super? And you'd also be pretty much giving up your Tlaloc as well, if you really like the Tlaloc, because you wouldn't exactly have a super to become full in order to use this at its maximum potential. So as we take a look at things again, we've got the Gunslinger and the Sunsinger, who can both have 2 grenades and 2 melee abilities at the exact same time. Those are the 2 subclasses that are able to do that already. So the Memory of Felwinter wouldn't really apply or work well for them. As far as the other characters and classes, every other class can also have 2 melee charges. So every class can have 2 melee charges, and every class except for the Stormcaller can have 2 grenades. Don't ask me why the Stormcallers are the only ones who got left out in that, but they are. And I guess that doesn't matter so much because it's not like the Stormcaller grenades are great anyway. So as we take a look at all of the things that you can actually utilize already in the game, as far as 2 melees, 2 grenades, which classes can already have 2 melees and 2 grenades at the same time, what classes are truly going to benefit from 2 grenades and 2 melees and giving up their super, because there is that little bit of a trade-off. And again, unfortunately, we don't know what the stat boosts are. If the stat boosts are significant, this is going to completely change. But assuming that the stat boosts are just to your armor, to your recovery, and to your health, and that it's maybe just a jump of 1 or 2, a plus 1 or 2 of each stat, we're going to say that that's not significant enough to change some of these opinions. As we look at the Titans overall, the Titans can always have 2 grenades. And that's a really good thing. You would definitely like to have 2 grenades on your Titan. But I would not personally give up my super on any Titan for 2 melee charges. Now, the one popular Titan people are talking about is the Defender Titan. They're talking about rocking out the no backup plans then, and you can then run around and get overshields with your 2 melee charges. And that sounds really nice, that sounds pretty nice, but if you actually are using that overshield properly, by the time your overshield runs out, your melee charge is going to be all the way back up if you've got the quickest recharge already on your Titan. So I personally wouldn't want to give up my bubble for that. I personally wouldn't want to give up my bubble for the Memory of Felwinter, and that's just my opinion. On my Sunbreaker and my Striker Titan, forget it. No way, definitely not at all. Now moving on to the Hunters is where it gets to be a little bit more interesting. In fact, we already talked about the fact that the Gunslinger definitely shouldn't be wearing the Memory of Felwinter, but the other 2 Hunter classes, I could definitely see it. I could definitely see that as being something useful. Because on your Blade Dancer, you could have 2 Blink Strikes, and I guess maybe you wouldn't necessarily need 2, because Blink Strike can cool down really fast, but you'll also have 2 Skip Grenades, and you can't get 2 Skip Grenades anywhere else, and Skip Grenades are pretty powerful right now. So Blade Dancer would be a probability, yes. And Night Stalker, absolutely yes. Not only could you wear the Graviton Forfeit and have your Shade Step and Keen Scout, but you'd also have 2 Wombo combos at your ability at all times. And even though the grenades aren't exactly great for the Night Stalker, 2 Wombo combos is really nice, especially whenever you're getting all kinds of extra abilities. So I think the Night Stalker would really benefit from that. As far as the Warlocks go, we're starting off with the Stormcaller. Would you really want to get 2 grenades, 2 of those Stormcaller grenades? I personally don't think so. I think the Stormcaller super is too good to give up. I wouldn't want to give that up for another grenade. And you'd also not be able to use stuff like Transcendence. I just don't think it fits really well with the Stormcaller. On the Voidwalker though, I think that's another pretty nice probability, yes. Because on that, you could actually end up rocking out 2 energy drains, which is good and bad. There's really nothing great about that one. But you could also rock out 2 Axiom Bolts, and you can't really use 2 Axiom Bolts anywhere else. You can use 2 Scatter Grenades, but not 2 Axiom Bolts, and Axiom Bolts are becoming extremely popular in the Crucible. So I think on the Voidwalker, the Night Stalker, and the Blade Dancer, the Memory of Felwinter could be something that you really see as coming into play and being pretty useful. On the other classes, not really seeing it. I'm just not seeing it. I don't see it as being a viable strategy to give up your super for that. Again, that's because we don't know the stat boosting right now. If those stat boosts are significant, then my opinion might change, but for right now, I would say that we're looking at about a third of the roster that could really make use of the Memory of Felwinter. Anyway, guys and gals, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smack that like button and subscribe to the channel. Check out these awesome videos. Good luck with your raids, your drops, your Rise of Iron, and I'll see you around in Destiny. Don't forget me, Felwinter.